Culture Crossroads, joined this segment by author, therapist, and teacher Brianna Ladapo. Brianna, thank you for making a few moments of your time available to join us on Culture Crossroads.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
We have so much to cover. I know we're not going to get there, so hopefully you'll enjoy the time. You'll come back on. But I wanted to start one of our primary cares, at least, and when I say our, I mean at Culture Crossroads and mine, is our children. It seems like in our country right now, we consider our children expendable if we consider them at all. We want to enshrine all kinds of abortion and baby murder and things into our state constitutions across the country, and our children just get left behind so much. So one of the things that I've appreciated about your work is how much you have done to heal and give significance to as many children as you can. And on the first stop here, recently, it was a few weeks ago, you were a part of the Documenting Hope, which was a healing our children by healing ourselves to equip parents in raising their kids and overcoming some of their past trauma. So I'd love to talk about, to get us going here, what brought about that event and what were some of the takeaways, some of the things that you wanted to instill in those who were at that event?
Well, first, my husband and I try to do as many events regarding children, family, and healing as possible. So it was one of many recent events we've done, but it was a great one. The team there is extraordinary, but they focus particularly on children who are on the spectrum, who might have a harder time accessing resources or getting the care they need. Now, I have to say, children in general are just my greatest love. They're the purest reflection of God's light on this planet. My husband and I have 3 boys, would have 20 if we had endless resources. But as I know you're a dad, so they're just the light of our lives. But as you said, kids, I think it's more than getting left behind. They are actively being targeted because they are vulnerable. And the quickest way to destroy a population is to go after the kids. So personally, I feel an obligation to do everything I can to protect children, to help them, and to equip them with the tools they need. But moreover, as a therapist, an energetic healer, and someone who's been through a significant amount of trauma myself and have been blessed to get to the other side of it, my true passion is giving people, whether they're children or parents, the tools to really transmute the darkness and the trauma in their own lives so that they don't pay it forward, because we don't want to pass these things along to our kids. Intergenerational trauma is very real, and it persists until someone has the wherewithal, the courage, and the tools to interrupt that cycle. So that's a lot of why I do this.
So you mentioned you've come through some of that yourself in overcoming past trauma for you. What are maybe 1 or 2 bullet points that you'd be willing to share that other parents, we're all, I mean, really everybody. In fact, so I spent many years in pastoring, and I still pastor to a degree, but and in ministry. And one of the things that I would take the congregation through is a process called spiritual transformation, and that's really, it's a similar thing, but where we're looking at, listen, where did your trauma come from? And now how do we get over that? And in our sense, how do we get over that through what Christ has done and so on and so forth? And so healing from past trauma is huge for so many, because we all have it. We all picked up our bad habits pretty young and learned how to self-medicate emotionally and otherwise and protect ourselves from the things that hurt us the most. And then when we do project that, it affects every relationship we have. And so until we overcome that, there's a whole aspect of that relationship in life that we're missing out on, but that we're holding ourselves ransom from because we're still trapped in that shell. What are a couple of maybe breakthrough moments or breakthrough steps that you might be able to share?
Well, first of all, I love everything you just said. There is so much wisdom there. In addition to whatever trauma we may experience in our own lives, we are also very much affected by the trauma of, or I should say the unresolved trauma of the people who raise us, our lineage, our environment. All of that gets absorbed. And as a baby, when you come into the world, you quite unconsciously start to absorb the stress responses and trauma patterns of the people who raised you. And most of us growing up, not even being conscious of this, we don't realize that the personality we are putting forth into the world that goes and has those relationships or takes this job or this career path is not even who we really are. It's a set of conditioned responses that we've adopted to protect ourselves from getting hurt any further. So one of the things I really like to zero in on, whether I'm working with kids or adults, is the idea of frequency. And frequency is essentially a word for that energetic beacon we, all of us, are constantly emitting. And it's more or less an amalgamation of our experiences. So if you've had a lot of trauma, you are essentially broadcasting that, not consciously, right? This is at a completely unconscious level, but you're broadcasting that experience. Personally, I believe this is why so many victims of assault are re-victimized. The numbers are crazy. I'm sure you've seen those. A lot of people have wondered for a long time how that could happen. It's because the soul recognizes a pattern and is trying to resolve it, trying to heal it, trying to understand. So until we can actually change that frequency, break up that trauma and move it out of the body so it's no longer informing our experience, we're destined to repeat that. So for me, similar to what you just shared, it's really about getting to the root of where did it come from? Where did it start? And also, where is it living in my physical body? Because the tissue actually does hold trauma. In fact, there's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score. And I love that notion because sure enough, it doesn't just live in the soul. You know, we're in these physical bodies for a period of time, and trauma does live in certain parts of the body. So it's just about getting to the bottom of that and solving that puzzle.
Now, I know you've done a lot of work as well with trafficked and exploited children. Mm-hmm. When I planted a church in Lake Wales, Florida, for a while in Central Florida, and Winter Haven was one of the hot spots for children going missing. In fact, there was a time it was estimated that a displaced or homeless child wasn't on the street 14 seconds before being approached by a trafficking recruiter. I'm not sure what else to call him, a predator. Mm-hmm. How did you start in some of that field, and what has been some of the work you've done since?
Well, it's funny you ask. I've always worked with kids in some capacity, but it wasn't until we moved to Florida just over 3 years ago that I really had any close and personal experience with trafficking. And certainly I had heard about it and worked in adjacent fields. But the first week we were here, I was taking my boys to their martial arts class. And my husband, since he works in Tallahassee, he is often not here because we live closer to Tampa. And so we were driving back after dark. I think we'd been in Florida for 4 days. And we pulled over to grab some food and got back in the car. And I pulled over just for a second, still in the parking lot, relatively well lit, seemed safe enough, and was passing the food out to my kids because it was pushing 7:30. So as I was doing that, I felt a presence. And I looked over, and on the passenger side window, there was a man approaching. And it was the fall, so it was after dark already. And immediately my gut just started to twitch. And then I looked in my rear view, and there was a man coming up the back of our minivan. And then I knew what I was going to see, but I looked to my left at the driver's side. Sure enough, there was a third man there trying to flank my vehicle. And luckily, my instincts are powerful, so I didn't even think. I just threw it into drive and got the heck out of there with my kids. And I didn't even think about what had happened or what they wanted. I just go into protective mom mode. The next day, I talked to a friend I had just met, and she said, "Oh yeah, well that part of Tampa is a trafficking corridor. You have to be careful. That happens all the time." And she said, as a mom in a minivan with 3 kids, you're a perfect target. And I thought, okay, I am, or so I thought, reasonably aware. I've been boxing for years. I've been through so much trauma and healing that I certainly would never think of myself as a victim or an easy target. And I thought, if that can happen to me, that can happen to anybody. And so it was really just through living here and starting to meet people. I've always worked in nonprofits, but as soon as that was on my radar, I started drawing nonprofits into my life that really focus on rescue and healing of trafficked children. And I feel like God ushered me in. It's almost my niche. I just fell into it. And because I've been through so much sexual trauma myself, I'm very well suited to help these little ones who've often been through more at 11 or 12 years old than a lot of adults go through in a lifetime. Yeah. And I'm finally in a place where, because I've dealt with my own stuff, I can actually help them without taking on so much emotional turmoil that I shut down, which would have been the case once upon a time.
Wow. Yeah, we've only scratched the surface. That's what I said at the beginning. I know I'm not going to be able to ask all my curious questions because our segment's going to be short. But you've been on the front lines in so many things, particularly with people overcoming, and that you end up standing out. You end up sticking out like a sore thumb, like a sore thumb in that way. Now, you've been very modest. You mentioned your husband who works in Tallahassee. Okay. He's Joseph Ladapo. He is the Florida Surgeon General. He's hanging out in Tallahassee quite a bit. But one of the questions I want to ask, because I know it probably was a sacrifice for you to make as a family. When Joseph Ladapo issued some of his recommendations during the pandemic, particularly when it came to the vaccine, where people shouldn't be taking it, or these things need to be pulled off the market, so on and so forth. Those are not popular positions in the United States of America, or certainly hadn't been over the past 4 years. Yeah. How did the weight and the gravity of those principled stands, how did that affect your family during that time, and what helped you stand firm?
Well, the interesting thing about divine timing is I feel like God always gives you what you need right at the moment when you need it. And Joe and I both talk extensively in our books about the healing we've been through, and a particular healer that really helped us both make great strides in reclaiming who we really are and what we're here to do at a service level. And we finished that work about 1 week before the pandemic began. And it was almost as if God was saying, all right, got the skills, now go test it. See if you really learned. So I have to share that while 10 years ago, what we've been through now probably would have broken me. Just all the hate and the vitriol and the death threats and the targeted projection, it really would have hurt me. But now I've cleared out all those voices of, oh, you're wrong. Oh, not good enough. Oh, don't trust your instinct. All of that is gone. At least 99%. I'm human. But in the absence of those voices, I am free to actually feel what my intuition is telling me and be in alignment with the divine. And so to me, when I know something is immoral or unjust, and I think I can speak for my husband here too, we will die on that hill. So regardless of the consequences, what others think or are out there spreading, or the reasons people try to push a certain narrative, all Joe and I know is that we have to do the right thing no matter what it costs. And we made that agreement very early on. I think it's one of the many reasons that we are such a good team. We will do whatever it takes. And, there have been some scary moments and some tough moments, but the truth is, I feel like where we are headed is in divine alignment. We're trying to create a world that works for everyone, a divine world. We need to purge this darkness and get back to the light. So there's only one way to do that. So I don't mind if it's hard. We are here for however long it takes and however hard it gets.
Well, I'm sure that many people, viewers and listeners alike to this program, are curious to know more about your story. You mentioned you and your husband both have books. Why don't you take a minute, let us know about your books, where people can find them, and where people can find you if they'd like to connect with you or excuse me, I talk for a living and, anyway, or learn more about maybe upcoming events that you might have.
Sure. The easiest way to do that for me is on my website, which is just my name, briannaladapo.com. And then My husband's book is really wonderful. It's called Transcending Fear, and mine is called Emerging from Darkness. And in a way, they're two halves of the same story. They're the respective stories about both of us went through deeply traumatic childhoods. And it's about what that looked like, and then what it looked like to go through the process of healing that trauma and getting onto the other side of it so we could powerfully serve and be who we intended to be. And those books are available at the major booksellers, Amazon and Barnes and Noble and places like that. And his upcoming events are on his, forgive me, I want to say Twitter. I'm terrible at social media, just the worst. But then mine are on my website.
That's okay. I just got a touch tone phone back in May, so this is all new for me.
Great. I feel you. Goodness.
So your husband, you can find him on Twitter, or X, as the kids call it these days.
Oh gosh, that's
right?
it. Please,
I know, but it's one of those names.
Letters.
And BriannaLadapo.com. You can find more there. Your books, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Brianna, thank you again for being with us. We look forward to having you back soon. For us on Culture Crossroads, we're going to switch gears and focus on the economy. Our resident friendly economist, Gita Chopra, joins us next. Don't go anywhere.